Madam Deputy President. I'll start by acknowledging your investment in this bill, and I also want to congratulate the Minister, Sophie Kotsis, who's been instrumental in bringing this bill to the Parliament. Also, of course, Treasurer Mookie, who has had a long history with both the TWU and this sector, and indeed pursuing this relentlessly in opposition over a long period of time. I'm very happy and proud indeed to support this very important piece of Minns government legislation. Once again, Madam Deputy President, Labor government's doing very Labor things. The legislation is significant because it brings several areas of workers' rights which have hitherto had no protections or industrial recourse into the remit of the Industrial Relations Commission to afford the workers access to wage and condition justice. Significantly, this bill allows for gig economy workers in the transport industry, predominantly rideshare and delivery drivers using platforms such as Uber, to be covered under Chapter 6 of the Industrial Relations Act. The bill removes exclusions to allow delivery drivers of items like milk and bread and dairy to access protections under the Act. The bill also provides protections for small transport operators with 2 or 3 vehicles currently. Once an owner-driver has more than one vehicle, they lose the protections of minimum terms and conditions that are afforded under the Industrial Relations Act. And I know many of those owner-drivers are up here today, and I'll acknowledge some of them later. Madam Deputy President, these are just a few of the ways this bill will modernise Chapter 6 of the Industrial Relations Act. I note that this legislation is supported by Business New South Wales and the Taxi Council. And then we're in the somewhat unusual position of the champions of business on that side of the House not supporting the bill notwithstanding. Once again, Madam Deputy President, the legislation exemplifies the worker-focused nature of the Minns Labor government. And as I said, a Labor government doing very Labor things on top of the raft of reforms that we've already achieved in 2 years. Up until now, Madam Deputy President, we have had a totally unfair and unjust situation whereby these workers had zero protections and recourse as a direct result of the willful inaction of those opposite, who I note are opposed to the legislation. And I want to also acknowledge some of the people here who are in the gallery here today. Tony Matthews, the President of the TWU New South Wales branch and an experienced owner-driver. Keith Stone, who until recently was an owner-driver and has fought for these changes for decades. Scott McPherson, an owner-driver at Star Track. Paul Newton, David Lenoir, Ralph Rivas and Zach O'Brien, owner-drivers from Team Global Express. Rob Serafini, an owner-driver at FedEx. Ian Barneville and Paul Dewberry, owner-drivers in the concrete sector. Dave Wojcik, an owner-driver at Toll. Rosalina Perozzi, a gig worker. Warren Thompson, a lorry owner-driver. Walter Coppin, a lorry owner-driver for ANC. And Ray Charles, a long concrete delegate of the TWU. I'm sorry if I have missed anyone. And the TWU has shared with me a real situation which was experienced by Paul, Dave, Ralph and Zach, who are, as I just mentioned, in the gallery today, and are owner-drivers from Team Global Express. In 2021, the division they worked for was sold to a new principal contractor. Any existing contract they had did not transfer over, which left their rates and conditions at risk. Fortunately, in this case, the new contractor did come to the bargaining table. Regardless, Paul made the point that this showed how vulnerable they were to the generosity of the new contractor. There was no requirement for the new contractor to honour their existing rates and conditions. Paul said, and I quote, "It is too easy to undercut our conditions by threatening to go back to minimum standards. Drivers share some of the liabilities, that is, insurances and running costs, all of which are assumed under conditions and agreements that are in place without the view they won't be subject to change. And We must, and I quote, we must finance our vehicles against our homes. People taking mortgages out against the purchase of plant and equipment, in this case trucks, with massive entry costs. So we are incredibly vulnerable. The security of knowing that a transfer of business comes with our conditions would make us feel a whole lot safer. This example illustrates how necessary this bill is to ensure the protection of small businesses. Small businesses, these are the champions of small business over here, Madam Deputy President, operating in the road transport industry. The bill ensures that an existing agreement would apply to the new principal contractor. Why, Madam Deputy President, why do we have to tolerate a situation where just because you are a small-scale owner-driver with a couple of trucks or a person working through the agency of a platform app, you have no rights at work and are at the behest of employers with no recourse to pursue claims for decent wages and conditions? By bringing these classifications and job types into the Industrial Relations Commission's remit, we give these workers the protection they deserve and make a real difference in their working lives by allowing them to be lifted up to the same standard as their colleagues in similar transport jobs across the industry. Now, Madam Deputy President, I want to address a couple of the points that were made in the debate. The Honourable Damien Tudorhope went on about duplication, and we've heard various contributions as to why there is necessary for this legislation to be enacted at the state level to avoid the to fill in the gaps. But even to the extent that there is duplication, why wouldn't you give access to working people to a low-cost, worker-friendly, accessible regime? I mean, what happens if what happens, Madam Deputy President, God forbid, if their mob gets elected at the federal level? We want protections for workers enshrined, and we want to assert ourselves. We want to assert our right as a state legislature to protect workers, notwithstanding what you might do if you ever get into government. And as far as the Honourable John Ruddock is concerned, who came in here and regaled us with the virtues of a totally free market, let AI rip, let platforms rip, and to hell with what happens to workers as a result. This is insanity writ large. Now, technology is a great thing. Platforms that ease or lubricate the sort of information between people and goods and services is a good thing, but not at the cost of workers' rights, not at the cost of workers' rights. And this gig economy, this gig platform technology is an example of things to come, Madam Deputy President, and I know you've done a lot of work on this as well. With the spectre of artificial intelligence, unless we get in front of this and preempt what's going to happen and legislate and empower workers to control AI and not the other way around, we're going to be in here time and time again playing catch-up. And we shouldn't have to play catch-up. We should be anticipating what can happen with technology, using it for the benefit to lift everyone up and empowering workers instead of leaving them on the scrap heap. Now, this legislation picks up the pieces and makes sure that doesn't happen. I just want to reiterate before I wind up, and I've said this many times in the House before, but it's very important that we understand the difference between, which should be patently obvious to all given how this debate's panning out, between this side of the House, that is this Labor government, compared to our opponents who do not believe in the rights of workers, Madam Deputy President. And the thought that you would ever have this legislation under your mob is unthinkable, and everyone knows it, and you've just proved it here today. And what we see here, for those who want to criticise us about our links to the trade union movement, what you see here is a transmission mechanism of working people telling us the problems that they've experienced over many years and using their connection to the labour movement, in this case via the Transport Workers Union, one of the greatest unions that's affiliated to our party, to get results. And that's what we're all about. And we don't hide from it, we're proud of it, and the fact that you come in here and oppose it says everything about your philosophy and how you treat working people. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. Your own supporters, Business New South Wales, support the legislation. through you, Madam Chair, your own supporters, the Business New South Wales, support the legislation. I just want to finish up by reiterating the decades of effort from the TWU and their members to bring this to fruition. I want to acknowledge the strong advocacy of Tony Matthews, Richard Olsen, who I know can't be with us today, Assistant Secretary of New South Wales Branch, Nick McIntosh, of course. And again, I want to reiterate, I notice Minister Kotsis is in the House to see this through. Again, Minister's been instrumental in a game-changing piece of legislation. And of course, again, I want to reiterate my thanks to the Treasurer for all the work he's done with this. Commend the bill to the House. As I said, this is a Labor government doing very, very Labor things.